My straight friend asked me to dance, and I didn't expect him to hold on so tight. I didn't expect that night to stick with me the way it did. Not the music, not the drinks, not even the laughter echoing through the dimly lit room. What stayed with me, what has followed me every day since, was the weight of his hand against mine, the warmth of his arm around my waist, and the way he didn't let go, even when the song had already ended. It was late, too late for us to still be at the party, but neither of us wanted to leave. Most people had already stumbled out into the cool night air, their footsteps fading into the city streets. The living room had thinned out, but music still drifted from a speaker someone had forgotten to turn off. It was an old love song, something soft, something meant for couples who'd been brave enough to claim the dance floor hours earlier. And then he looked at me, my best friend, my straight best friend. He smirked the way he always did when he was about to tease me, when he was about to turn something ordinary into a joke. "Dance with me," he said. First I laughed. I thought he was kidding, the way he always did. He was the type to poke fun at everything, to push boundaries, to stir things just to see my reaction. But when he didn't move, when he kept his hand extended toward me, I realized he wasn't joking. I remember hesitating. My chest tightened. My pulse quickened. Felt dangerous. Stupid, even. Because when you're the gay best friend, the one who's already caught yourself lingering too long on his smile, who's already memorized the slope of his jaw and the way his voice softens when he's tired, these moments don't feel harmless. They feel like cliffs, like places you could fall and not know if anyone would catch you. But I placed my hand in his anyway. It was supposed to be nothing, just a silly little dance between friends, the kind of thing we'd laugh about later. But the second his fingers curled around mine, everything shifted. His touch wasn't tentative. It was firm, steady, certain. And when he pulled me closer, resting his hand on my back, I felt my breath catch in my throat. We began to move slowly, clumsily at first. Neither of us were dancers, and the small living room wasn't much of a stage. But none of that mattered. The music filled the silence, and somehow we found a rhythm. His eyes were locked on mine, not in a playful, mocking way, but in a way that made my skin burn. I kept waiting for him to laugh, to break the tension, to remind me that this was all just for fun. But he didn't. He held me close, closer than he ever had before, and the longer we swayed, the tighter his grip became. There's something dangerous about being that close to someone you love who doesn't love you back, or at least who shouldn't. It's a kind of torture, but it's also the closest thing to heaven you'll ever touch. Every part of me was screaming to remember reality. He was straight. He wasn't mine. And yet, in that moment, I let myself forget. I let myself feel the way his breath tickled against my neck, the way his chest rose and fell against mine, the way his thumb brushed, ever so gently, along my spine. The song ended, but he didn't let go. I shifted slightly, tried to pull back, but his arm tightened. Just a fraction, but enough. Enough to make my head spin. Enough to make me wonder if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't imagining it. "Another one," he whispered, almost too softly for me to hear. So we stayed there, rocking to a song neither of us knew. Two men in an empty living room, holding on like we'd been waiting our whole lives for an excuse. I wish I could tell you that was the start of something clear, something we could both name. But it wasn't, because when the music finally stopped, when the world intruded again, he stepped back. He smiled like nothing had happened. He ruffled my hair the way he always did, and then he collapsed onto the couch, already reaching for another drink. I stood there, trying to catch my breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. Because for me, that dance wasn't a joke. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. Here's the thing about being close to someone like him. You become an expert at pretending. Pretending that the way he slings his arm around your shoulders doesn't mean more to you. Pretending that the way he calls you late at night just to talk doesn't make your heart race. Pretending that you're not in love with him, even when every part of you aches with it. And that night made pretending so much harder. The days after were torture. Every time I saw him, I thought of his hand on my back, his breath against my neck. Every time he smiled, I remembered how it felt to be held like that. How it felt to believe, for just a few minutes, that maybe I wasn't imagining everything between us. But he didn't bring it up. Not once. It was like it never happened. And I didn't have the courage to ask. So we went back to normal, our version of normal. Hanging out, laughing at stupid jokes, staying up too late playing games or wandering the city streets. But beneath it all, there was a current. Something unspoken. Something I couldn't shake. And then one night, weeks later, it happened again. We were alone, sitting on the balcony of his apartment, the city humming beneath us. He'd had a few drinks, just enough to loosen his edges. The night was warm, the kind of summer night that feels endless. Music drifted up from a bar down the street, muffled but steady. And just like before, he turned to me with that same smirk. "Dance with me," he said again. My heart skipped. My mouth went dry. I wanted to say no, to save myself from the confusion, from the ache that would surely follow. But I couldn't. I couldn't deny him. So I let him pull me up, let him wrap his arms around me. And once again he held me too tight, too close, like he didn't want to let go. And that was the night I realized something I shouldn't have. Maybe I wasn't imagining it at all. Maybe, just maybe, he needed me as much as I needed him. I didn't sleep that night, even after he finally let go. After he laughed and sat back down like nothing had happened, I lay awake on his couch staring at the ceiling. The city buzzed outside, but all I could hear was the echo of his voice. "Dance with me." My body still remembered the press of him against me, the steady thrum of his heartbeat through his chest. And my mind, God, my mind wouldn't let it go. Because something about the way he held me didn't feel like a joke anymore. The problem was, I couldn't ask. How could I? He was my best friend. The one who'd been there for me through everything. Breakups, bad days, family fights, nights when I drank too much and cried in his passenger seat. He never judged me. He never made me feel like too much. And he was straight. Or at least he said he was. And maybe I was a fool for doubting that, for clinging to moments that probably meant nothing to him. But if they meant nothing, why did he hold on so tight? Weeks passed, and life settled into its usual rhythm. We went out with our group, played video games until sunrise, wasted time the way only best friends can. But things had shifted. For me, at least. Every time his hand brushed mine, every time his shoulder pressed against me on the couch, I felt electricity run through me. And sometimes, just sometimes, I thought I saw it in him too. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way he lingered, always finding excuses to stay just a little longer. It was enough to make me crazy. Then came his birthday. It was one of those nights where everyone showed up, old friends, coworkers, even his cousins. His apartment was packed, music blasting, drinks flowing. I should have been relaxed. I should have just blended into the crowd. But he kept finding me, pulling me into the kitchen to help with drinks, tugging me onto the balcony just to breathe for a second, laughing too loudly at jokes I didn't think were funny, like he was trying to fill silence that wasn't really there. And then, when the crowd had thinned, when most people had left or passed out, he did it again. "Dance with me," he whispered. This time there was no music, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. But he didn't care. He stepped closer, slid his hand into mine, and pulled me in. I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on his breath. His forehead almost touched mine. And when his arms circled my waist, my body melted into him like it had been waiting for that moment all along. We swayed in silence. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. His grip was firm, unshakable, like I was something he didn't want to lose. And then, God help me, his hand slid up my back. Slow, deliberate. I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed. My mind shouted at me to pull away, to stop this before it ruined everything. But I couldn't, because for the first time I wasn't imagining it. For the first time I could feel it too, whatever it was burning between us. I wanted to say something, to ask him what this meant, why he was doing this. But before I could open my mouth, he pulled away. Too fast, like he'd caught himself. He laughed, forced, strained. "Man, you're terrible at this," he said, ruffling my hair. And just like that, the moment was gone. I stood there, swallowing back everything I wanted to scream, everything I wanted to confess. He turned away, busying himself with cleaning up empty bottles, pretending like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew he had felt it too. The weeks that followed were harder than ever. He didn't mention it, and neither did I. But the air between us was thick, heavy with all the things we weren't saying. Every time he texted me, I felt a jolt in my chest. Every time he called me over, I told myself not to expect anything, not to hope. But then he'd touch my shoulder, lean too close, let his hand linger on me longer than necessary, and hope would surge through me again. It was maddening, torturous, and yet I couldn't pull away, because no matter how much it hurt, I wanted him. The breaking point came one night when we were alone again. We'd been watching movies, the kind that lull you into comfort. He was stretched out on the couch and I was beside him, our legs tangled in the small space. At some point, his arm slid behind me. Casual. Easy. But then his hand settled against my shoulder, and he didn't move it. I tried to focus on the screen, but I couldn't. All I could think about was his fingers. How close they were. How warm they felt. My heart was racing so fast it made me dizzy. And then, without thinking, I leaned into him. Just a little. Just enough. He didn't move away. In fact, he pulled me closer. I don't know how long we sat like that. His arm around me, my head against his shoulder. The world blurred until it was just us, suspended in something I couldn't name. And then he whispered, so quietly I almost thought I'd imagined it, "You always make me feel safe." I stopped breathing. Safe. That word cut through me like a blade. Because it wasn't love. It wasn't desire. It wasn't the thing I ached for him to say. But it was something. Something he couldn't say to anyone else. Something he chose to say to me. I didn't know whether to cry or to hold on to him tighter. So I did neither. I just sat there, burning in silence, knowing that once again, he was holding me too tight to let go. But the truth? No matter how close he held me, I knew it wasn't enough. Because sooner or later, something had to break. The breaking came sooner than I expected. It wasn't some big fight. It wasn't anger or betrayal or anything dramatic like that. It was quieter, more painful because of it. We were at a bar with a group of friends. It was one of those crowded nights where the music was too loud to think. The kind of night where everyone's bodies pressed together just to carve out space. I wasn't even supposed to go. I'd been tired, worn out from the endless tug-of-war inside me. But he'd asked me directly, "Come with me. It won't be fun without you." So I went. Because I always went. And for the first hour or two, it was fine. We laughed, we drank, we shouted over the music. He stayed close, always brushing against me in the crowd, always tugging at my sleeve like he didn't want to lose me in the chaos. But then she showed up. A girl I didn't know. A girl who smiled at him like she'd already decided he was hers. And the worst part? He smiled back. I watched them dance. Watched her press herself against him, her arms circling his neck. Watched him laugh, lean in, whisper something that made her grin. And I swear, it felt like my ribs cracked open. Because I'd been fooling myself, hadn't I? Believing the way he held me meant something more. Believing the whispers, the touches, the nights spent tangled on the couch were building into something we'd one day admit. But he wasn't mine. He never was. He was just a man dancing with a girl. A straight man. Reminding me of the truth I'd been too afraid to face. I left before he noticed. I told one of our friends I wasn't feeling well, and I slipped out into the night. The air was sharp against my face, but it didn't clear my head. Nothing could. I walked home with his laugh echoing in my ears, with the image of him holding someone else, just as tightly as he had held me, burned into my brain. And when I got home, I collapsed onto my bed and finally let myself cry. The next day, he texted me, "Where'd you go last night? You left without saying anything. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before I answered. "Yeah, just tired." A lie, but easier than the truth. Because the truth would have ruined everything. For days after, I tried to pull away. I dodged his calls. I told him I was busy, made excuses not to hang out. I thought maybe distance would heal me, that maybe if I could just create space, I could finally breathe again. But he didn't let me. He showed up at my door one night, unannounced, holding a bag of takeout and wearing that same easy smile. "You've been avoiding me," he said. Not accusing, not angry, just certain. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words stuck. Because of course he knew. He always knew. So I let him in. We ate on the floor like we always did when he brought food over. He talked about his week, about work, about nothing in particular. And I tried to act normal. But the longer I looked at him, the harder it was. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Why do you do that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He blinked at me. "Do what?" "Hold me like you do. Ask me to dance. Say things that—" I stopped, my throat closing around the words. "Things that make me think you feel something you don't." Silence. The kind of silence that makes the walls close in, that makes the air too heavy to breathe. He set his food down slowly, carefully, like buying himself time. And then he looked at me, his eyes steady, unreadable. "I don't know," he said finally. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "I don't know why I do it." My chest tightened. "Do you have any idea what that does to me?" "Yes," he whispered. "I think I do." And for the first time, he didn't look away. It was the most honest moment we'd ever had. And yet, it gave me no clarity. Because if he really knew, then why keep doing it? Why keep pulling me in, holding me so close, making me believe in something he wasn't ready to give? I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to kiss him. I wanted to walk out and never see him again. But I did none of those things. I just sat there, staring at him, waiting for an answer he didn't have. Eventually, he sighed, ran a hand through his hair the way he always did when he was overwhelmed. "I just feel like myself when I'm with you," he said. "Like I don't have to pretend. Like the world makes sense. And sometimes when I hold on to you—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I don't want to let go." My heart ached, because those words were everything I wanted. And yet they weren't enough. "Do you want me?" I asked, barely a whisper. His jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to the floor. And in that silence I had my answer. He left not long after. We didn't fight. We didn't say goodbye. He just gathered his things and slipped out the door, leaving me alone with the pieces of something I couldn't name. And I sat there in the quiet, wondering if I'd just lost him forever. The days that followed were unbearable. He didn't text. I didn't call. For the first time in years, there was nothing between us. And maybe that was for the best. Maybe we both needed it. But the silence hurt worse than anything. Worse than watching him with her. Worse than the ache of unspoken words. Because at least then I had him. Now I had nothing. Until the night he showed up again. It was raining. Hard. The kind of storm that rattles windows and soaks you through in seconds. I was curled up on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when I heard the knock at my door. I almost didn't answer, but something in me knew. And when I opened it, there he was, standing in the downpour, drenched to the bone, his chest heaving like he'd been running. He looked at me with wild eyes, desperate. And then he said the words that shattered me all over again. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I can't lose you." He was dripping onto the floor, water pooling at his feet, his hair plastered to his forehead. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the way his voice cracked when he said those words. What mattered was the way he looked at me. Not like a joke, not like a friend, but like someone terrified of being abandoned. I froze. My chest ached, my throat tight. "You can't just say that," I whispered. "You can't show up like this, hold me like you do, and then run the second it gets too real. You can't have it both ways." His eyes flickered with something, fear, guilt, maybe both. "I know," he said, his voice low. "I know I've messed this up, but I don't know what to do. All I know is, when I'm with you it feels like—" He stopped himself, swallowed hard. "It feels like home." The rain kept pounding behind him. The silence stretched. And I, fool that I am, stepped aside and let him in. He toed off his soaked shoes, shivering slightly, and stood in the middle of my living room like he didn't know what to do with himself. I handed him a towel, but he barely touched it. Why now? I asked. My voice was sharper than I intended. Why come here tonight? Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, he admitted. His words were rushed, tumbling out in a way that felt unplanned. I tried to ignore it, to push it down. But then I thought, what if you move on? What if one day I wake up and you're not here anymore? I can't stand the thought of that. My heart clenched. Because that was it, wasn't it? He wanted me, just not in the way I wanted him. He wanted my presence, my comfort, my loyalty. But did he want me? I stepped closer, close enough to see the raindrops clinging to his lashes. Do you want me? I asked again, just like I had weeks before. This time he didn't look away. He didn't answer either. Instead, he closed the space between us and pulled me into his arms. The embrace was desperate, almost crushing. His wet clothes soaked into mine, but I didn't care. His face pressed into my shoulder, and I could feel the tremor in his body. Don't leave me, he whispered. It broke me, because in that moment, I would have given him anything. I would have burned myself to keep him warm. But it wasn't the same as love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Still, I held him, because how could I not? We stayed like that for a long time, just standing in my living room, clinging to each other while the storm raged outside. Eventually, he loosened his grip, but he didn't let go completely. Can I stay? He asked softly. I should have said no. I should have told him that until he figured out what he really wanted, we couldn't keep doing this dance. But when I looked at him, vulnerable, scared, searching, I couldn't. Yeah, I breathed. You can stay. That night he slept in my bed. Not on the couch. Not in the spare room. With me. We didn't kiss. We didn't cross that line. But he curled into me like he was afraid I'd vanish in my sleep. His hand rested on my chest, his breath warm against my neck. And I lay there wide awake, torn apart. Because part of me wanted to believe this was it, the beginning of something real. And another part of me knew I was setting myself up to break. In the morning, he was quiet, distant. He thanked me for letting him stay. He smiled, soft but guarded, like a wall had gone back up overnight. And then he left, promising he'd call later. He didn't. That became our pattern. Nights of closeness, mornings of silence. He'd pull me in, hold me too tight, whisper things that felt like confessions. And then the sun would rise, and he'd retreat again, as if nothing had happened. It was like living in two worlds at once, the world where he was mine in the dark, and the world where he wasn't in the light. And I couldn't live like that forever. The breaking point came one night months later. We'd gone out drinking, just the two of us. The city lights blurred. The air was cool, and we were both buzzing, loose with laughter. Somewhere between one bar and the next, he grabbed my hand. Not casually, not joking. He laced his fingers through mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for a few blissful blocks, I let myself believe it. I let myself feel like we were something real, something more than friends. But then we passed a group of strangers, and he dropped my hand instantly, like it was shameful, like I was shameful. My stomach turned, my chest burned. I stopped walking. What are we doing? I asked. The words spilled out, ragged and raw. Because I can't keep living in this in-between. I can't keep being your secret comfort when you don't even know what I am to you. He froze. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted away. I don't know, he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know what this is. That's not good enough, I snapped. Not anymore. The silence between us stretched, heavy and unbearable. Finally, he whispered, I'm scared. And for the first time I saw it. The fear in him, not just of what this meant, but of what it would make him. I'm scared of what it means if I want you the way I think I do, he confessed. His eyes glistened under the streetlights. I've never felt this before, not with anyone, and it terrifies me. My anger dissolved into something softer, something aching. Then be scared, I said quietly. But don't use me as your safety net while you figure it out. I deserve more than that. His face crumpled. He looked at me like I'd ripped the ground out from under him. And maybe I had. That was the night we broke. He walked me home, silent the whole way. At my door he hugged me, tight, desperate, lingering. And then he let go. This time for real. We didn't talk for weeks. The silence was brutal, but it was also necessary, because I needed to remember who I was without him. I needed to learn how to stand on my own, instead of in the shadow of someone who couldn't love me fully. And yet, even as the weeks stretched on, I couldn't forget. The way he looked at me, the way he held on like he was afraid I'd slip away. Part of me still believed he'd come back. Part of me still hoped he'd figure it out. Because when he asked me to dance that first night, and didn't let go, something in me changed forever. Hope is a dangerous thing. It lingers long after it should have burned out. It survives on scraps, on half smiles and almost words, on memories of nights when someone held you like they couldn't live without you. And for months, that's all I had, hope. I told myself I was moving on. I threw myself into work, into other friendships, into long walks alone when the nights got too heavy. I even tried dating again. Nice guys, kind guys, men who actually wanted me without hesitation. But none of them felt like him. Every time someone held my hand, I remembered the way he had squeezed mine just a little too tight. Every time someone leaned in close, I thought of his breath on my neck, the way he'd whispered things that kept me awake at night. It wasn't fair. To them. To me. But that's the curse of loving someone who never gave you clarity. You're haunted by possibilities that never even happened. It was 3 months before I saw him again. He showed up at a friend's gathering late, looking like he hadn't slept in days. When our eyes met across the room, my stomach flipped, the way it always did. For a while, we pretended not to notice each other. We stayed in separate corners, laughed with separate groups. But the gravity was there. It always was. Eventually, he crossed the room. Slowly, carefully, like he wasn't sure if I'd let him close. "Hey," he said. Just that. Quiet, uncertain. And I hated him for it. Because after everything, after months of silence, that was all he could give me. "Hey." "Hi," I answered, my voice sharper than I intended. The space between us was thick with everything unsaid. Later that night, when most people had gone, I slipped out onto the balcony. I needed air, space, distance. But minutes later, the door slid open, and he stepped out too. I didn't look at him. I just stared at the city lights, praying he wouldn't shatter me all over again. But then he spoke. "I miss you." 2 words. Soft, raw, unshielded. And damn it, I broke. I turned to him, anger flaring through the ache. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to disappear, to hold me only when it's dark, to drop my hand the second someone looks, and then come back and say you miss me." His face crumpled. "You're right. I don't deserve to. But I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop remembering how it feels when I'm with you." The words hit me like glass in my chest. "You're scared," I said flatly. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm terrified." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. His voice cracked when he answered. "Because I think I'm more scared of losing you than I am of everything else." The silence after was unbearable. Because what was I supposed to do with that? He hadn't said he loved me. He hadn't even said he wanted me. But he'd given me just enough to make hope surge through me again. Just enough to keep me tethered. And I hated myself for wanting to believe him. We started talking again after that night. Slowly at first, like we were relearning how to exist around each other. Texts, calls, late-night conversations that stretched until morning. But the difference was he didn't hide anymore. He didn't pretend nothing had happened. He didn't drop my hand when someone looked. He didn't laugh it off when I caught him staring. It was like he'd decided to lean into the fear instead of running from it. Still, he never labeled it. Never called it love. Never called it anything. And I didn't push. Not at first. Because having him back, having him try, was enough. Until it wasn't. One night, months into this fragile new rhythm, we ended up back where it all started. Party. Music. A living room that had emptied out as the night wore on. And once again, he turned to me with that same look. The one that had haunted me from the beginning. "Dance with me," he said. I almost laughed. Almost cried. Because here we were, circling the same moment, like time itself hadn't moved at all. But I took his hand anyway, because I always would. And when he pulled me close this time, when his arms wrapped around me, there was no hesitation. No joking. No letting go when the song ended. We just stayed there, moving, breathing, existing in a space that finally felt like ours. Do you ever regret it? I whispered into the space between us. Regret what? This? I said. Us. Whatever this is. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes steady, unflinching. No, he said. Never. My chest tightened. Then what do you want from me? He swallowed hard. I could see the battle behind his eyes, the years of fear, the walls he'd built. And then, finally, he let them crack. I want you, he said. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it looks like. But I know I don't want to live without you. I felt something in me shatter and then rebuild all at once. Because for the first time, he wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't leaving me with silence where there should have been answers. For the first time, he was holding me just as tightly in the light as he had in the dark. And maybe that was enough. The truth is, our story didn't turn into a fairy tale overnight. It was messy, complicated, full of hesitations and half-steps forward. There were still nights when fear crept back in, when he pulled away, when I wondered if we'd ever really make it. But there were also mornings when I woke to find him watching me like I was something he'd been searching for his whole life. Afternoons when his hand found mine and never let go, no matter who was watching. Evenings when he asked me to dance in our tiny kitchen, swaying to music only we could hear. And in those moments I realized something. Sometimes love doesn't arrive clean or easy. Sometimes it's born in confusion, in fear, in nights of holding on too tight because letting go feels impossible. But love is love. And finally, he was brave enough to claim it. When I look back on it now, I don't think about the tears or the silence or the ache of wanting someone I couldn't have. I think about that first night, that first dance, the way he held me, not knowing yet what it meant, but knowing, deep down, that he didn't want to let go. And maybe that's what love really is. Not certainty, not perfection, but choosing again and again to hold on a little tighter.